Hello, Internet. I'm Corione, your witch in residence. And today I'm going to talk about a bit of a hard one because this is something that it's been touched on a lot in fiction, science fiction, what have you, but a lot of people have difficulty with this. I'm going to talk about forgiveness. And I felt the best metaphor I could use is Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Now, for those who are not Star Trek fans and who have not seen this movie, I'm going to give you a brief rundown and then we'll go through what I mean when I talk about forgiveness. Before I do, though, um, there are a lot of you that watch my videos that have still not yet subscribed. I would encourage you to please consider doing so. It helps out the channel a lot, it helps me out a lot, and it shows the YouTube algorithm just how much you guys care. So I would really appreciate it if you would consider giving it a like, a share, and a subscribe. With all that being said, let's talk about Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Now, this movie takes place right near the end of Captain Kirk and the original crew's career. Okay, they're all old men and women now. And they're getting to the point where they're done with their trek across the stars. And some of the crew have moved on to other jobs, but the core group is still hanging in. And as many of you are aware, the big bad guy against the original Trek was the Klingons. These were an alien race that were built on ruling the stars. They were an empire, and they conquered everything that they came in contact with. Now, Kirk later in his career finds out that he does in fact have a son. And his son is a pretty brilliant scientist, and he's quite proud of his son, and rightly so. Well, the Klingons kill his son. And from that point on, he's, hated them. Before they were just an opponent, somebody that he could sit across the view screen and argue with and fight with and sometimes be diplomatic with. But ever since they killed his son, it's been different. He's needed to fight them. He's needed to hunt them and hurt them. And due to an environmental and industrial accident in the Klingon home system, the Klingons as an empire are going to die unless they manage to arrange for peace with the Federation and, in fact, get Federation aid. And there are large swaths of the Federation Admiralty that does not want this to happen. They want to continue the war, to finally put the Klingons down for good. And you've got to remember that they've lost people too, right? Their pain is there and it's real. They've lost friends, they've lost family, they've watched countless people be butchered. They don't want peace, they want to finish the job. And as far as they're concerned, the job is ending the Klingon threat from ever happening again. But it turns out that the person that initially started these peace proceedings is actually Kirk's second in command, Spock. And Spock has the logic right. Now is the only time they're going to be able to arrange peace with the Klingons, because it is time for peace. It's time to put this away. There are bigger issues. There are more lives that can be saved than lives that could possibly ever be accounted for with some sort of act of vengeance. Kirk has a lot of trouble with this. He doesn't want to forgive them. They killed his son. They've killed friends. They've killed colleagues. They've killed countless people throughout the galaxy. So what do? Do you write them off as monsters that should be put down? Or do you seek peace with them in a dialogue? And ultimately, that's really what the movie is about, is deciding whether you want to go for that dialogue or deciding to go for war. And there's a whole plot on both sides of hardliners that want to see the wars continue, to finally end the threat of either the Federation or the Klingons for good. So I know for a lot of you, the religion you were raised in says that forgiveness is good and that you must offer forgiveness to those who have wronged you. But there are other philosophies out there that say, no, we don't have to forgive, right? You are not obliged to offer someone forgiveness if they seek it. And, even Alcoholics Anonymous says that while you have to seek forgiveness for the hurts you've done, they don't necessarily have to forgive you. You just have to make the effort. And I do get that logic, right? You can't make somebody forgive you. But the trick is, we should consider forgiveness when it is appropriate. And the reason being is this: cycles of hatred trap both parties. Okay. I'll give you a classic example because it's the easiest one I can think of off the top of my head. In a classic example, let's say we're living in like a Conan style era, and ruffians come to your village and they kill a member of your family. So you get your people together, the men of the village, and the neighboring villages rise up and go and attack these raiders and wind up killing their men. But they leave some of the children alive, and those children grow up. And then the cycle repeats itself on and on and on until nobody is left. Until all that is left is pain and anger, and you wind up with tribal conflicts that have been going on for hundreds of thousands of years, right? We can look at the current crises around the world in, the Palestinian and Israeli conflict as an example of two sides that are unwilling to forgive the past and move forward. And I understand their justifications. I'm not saying that they are not valid in their concerns on either side, and that, there is a lot of tension and a lot of bad blood in that region where wherever you fall in the argument, we can all agree that this is a conflict that has been going on for a very, very long time and has no clear, reasonable answer. So if conflicts like that can progress for forever, why can't we just not forgive and let these conflicts go on? Take a look at both sides of the equation. The Palestinians are suffering. The Israelis are suffering. Both sides are suffering. And they're going to continue until everybody on both sides is willing to say that they've had enough and it's time for peace. And, there is a logic to seeking justice, but when justice becomes vengeance, it goes too far. And we have to consider peace. We have to consider forgiveness, because forgiveness has to come before peace can ever have a chance. And it has to come from both sides, right? Sometimes even you have to be willing to forgive yourself for what you've done and seek that forgiveness before the other party will even consider it. So, why is forgiveness good? Well, because hatred builds and it steals away the fuel and energy you have for anything else other than destruction. And, things have come that have been necessary out of destruction. But ultimately, what good comes from it is rebuilding. Is not the destruction itself, but is the rebuilding. It is the understanding. It is the willingness that comes from working with either side and, having a shared laugh and having shared community stories and a shared history. We don't grow from hatred. We only shrink from it. We don't get bigger from it in the long term. We only lose. Remember that the next time your first thought is, "Oh, I'm gonna kill that guy," right? Stop, Think about why they're doing it. And ask yourself if this is something that you can, in theory, forgive them for. Okay? And make the decision whether you're going to do it or not. You don't have to forgive. I'm never going to say that you absolutely have to. But you have to be willing to look inside yourself and say, and analyze it truly whether this is something that can be forgiven. Okay? There are things that can't. I get that. I respect that. There are things that you can say, you know what? One day I may be able to forgive this person, but right now I am too emotionally hot on the issue. I can't right now. And that's okay too. But ultimately, forgiveness is about letting go of hate and letting go of anger. And while it is certainly understandable that sometimes you need to hold on to that hate and hold on to that anger to help you through a current crisis, you do also have to learn when it is time to let it go. Okay? All things are transitory. All things have a time, and then that time ends. Keep that in mind, that hatred should not be eternal. And in order for the hatred to stop, forgiveness has to begin. And that doesn't mean you forget. That doesn't mean you're going to, let the person that murdered your friend, into your house to play your Xbox. But it does mean to say, I'm not going to hate you anymore for what you've done. I'm going to ask you to pay for it. I'm going to ask you to deal with the repercussions of your actions. But I'm not going to make things worse for that, because ultimately we don't forgive people for them. We forgive them for ourselves, because it's not worth hanging on to that hate forever. Okay. It's a hard lesson to learn, and it's a hard thing to do, to decide, I'm just not going to hate somebody today. And I'm going to try to not do it tomorrow and the day after that. Because ultimately, that is what forgiveness is. And it is the most challenging thing you will ever do. And I will never tell somebody that it was easy. It is, God, impossibly hard. But ultimately, you have to make the decision on choosing between what is hard and what is easy. And I guarantee you that easy is faster, but harder is far more fulfilling. We don't always have to forgive. We shouldn't always have to forgive. But we do have to have times where we say, it's time to forgive. Okay? I know that traditionally we look forward to new possibilities at this time of year in the spring. Okay? We look forward to summer and the spring and the growing things. But all of that requires a new beginning. Let's pick today to be a new beginning. You don't have to actively say to somebody, hey, I forgive you. But perhaps just let go of some old hatreds. Decide that you're not going to give that hatred any more fuel, that you're going to save that for more positive things. You're going to let it go. Okay? And you're going to move on to the new possibilities, to the undiscovered country that is the future. Okay? And if that future involves that other person, then that's okay. It doesn't have to, but it's okay if it does, because you know that you can move on and that you've grown and that you're willing to let go of the hatreds of the past and move forward into a new future where you work hand in hand with people, which ultimately is what happens in Star Trek. Is the Klingons turn out to be one of the best allies the Federation could have possibly had for their future. And they learn to grow together and be solid allies and partners in an uncertain future that they're both walking into together. You don't have to be best buds with the people you forgive. You don't have to forget what they did to you and be wary of such a thing happening in the future. But eventually you're going to decide You're going to have to make that call on whether it is too hard and too much energy to constantly be fueling your negative thoughts towards that person. Just stop having those thoughts. Focus on something else. Focus on something better, on the new, on a future, on the bright. It doesn't mean you have to forget, but it does mean moving forward and letting yourself be a little lighter and a little easier on yourself. Ultimately, all emotions in a lot of ways are self-contained, right? We own them. They are our emotions. So you have to decide what best to use that energy that you're going to put into emotions into. Is it going to be hateful, to be angry, to be bitter? Or is it going to be joyful, to be brighter, to be happier, to be willing to look for the best in new experiences and new people? I know that sounds a little weird coming from, a gothic witch telling you, hey, be light, be airy, be fun, be free. But if I can say it, I think you guys can do it. So consider that. And in the comments, if you could, guys, please consider leaving an old hatred you have that you're willing to let go of. Okay. A an example of somebody that maligned you that you're willing to say, you know what? I'm not going to let that power hang over me anymore. I'm going to move on to better and bigger and brighter things. So let's talk about it. As always, I'm always here to discuss anything you guys want in the comments. Please feel free. My Twitter and every other way to get a hold of me is right down, there. Okay. So please feel free to reach out. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to end the video here. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.